Hello, and I'm Eric Miscoll with EMS Now. Welcome to this first episode of the year, the Eric Miscoll Show. Thanks for joining us. As always, I have my lovely and attractive co-host Philip Stoughton joining us. And today we're talking about part numbering. And we have two guests, both Kaitlyn Tredaway, the COO of CalcuQuote, and Scott Ryan, a senior consultant with Cetec ERP, joining us to share their thoughts and insights on this. Before we begin into that, let me just do a couple quick housekeeping things for anybody listening in. If you are doing this live, you will be muted. We will not be listening to you. So please don't try to pose questions live. There is a question tab. You're welcome to insert a question there at any point, and we will do our best to respond to that. And the session is being recorded and will be rebroadcast hopefully next week and thereon, and it'll be stored on EMS Now and shared, so you can come back to it again and again and again. So because the insights and the wisdom imparted is going to be so fantastic, you're going to want to. So anyway, materials are probably the most volatile element within electronics manufacturing. The protocols used to manage those within manufacturing environments is what we're here to talk about. And that really comes down to part numbering. So Scott and Kaitlyn, I have no assigned questions for you, as I said. So I just wanted to have this as a discussion around the greater issue, because you guys live this every day in your work with it. So let's just start kind of big time. If you can define what the big problem is with part numbering and why people struggle with this, in your opinion. And maybe, Kaitlyn, let's start with you.
Yeah, sure. I think part of the issue is that people do it differently across every single company, even across the same industries and types of companies. So CalcuQuote specifically works with contract manufacturers in the electronic space, mostly PCBA, some cable wire harness companies. And there's really not a common way of handling your part numbers or even a consistent way of doing it. What I mean by that is some people will use their own internal part numbers. Some people will use their end customer part numbers. Some people use an MPNs, so manufacturer's part number. Most of that is a combination. So a lot of the times people are using combinations, but there is not a consistent way to say, okay, well, here's how I use my MPNs. I have a lot of customers who do a one-to-many relationship. I have some customers, I'm sure Scott can see this, some customers who do a one-to-one relationship with their IPNs to customer part numbers to MPNs. And that makes it really difficult to have consistency when you're doing purchasing, when you're stocking your materials, when you're looking out in the market of what's available, sharing things across the board. I see one of the biggest issues being that people have a lot of excess inventory. And as we all know, EMS is a very small margin business. So excess inventory on your shelves that you don't know if you can use or not is a huge problem. And that all starts with the way that you set up your ERP and that you do part numbering internally. So a big issue for EMS and their end customers as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So much is dictated as a contract manufacturer by the customer. It's not an OEM. You own the form, fit, and function, and you have the design all the way through your product mix. It's that your value is inheriting and absorbing the kind of the chaos of your customers. So you don't get to own per se, your part numbers. You get to figure out how to manage that efficiently to take care of your customer. And so, it's not, and then kind of further, we work, across all industries in manufacturing. It's not like a machine shop where you're machining down some bar stock, or you're not stamping metal and bending. You have hundreds of components on a BOM. And you've got to, you're navigating, helping your customer design that PCBA or that wire harness, right? And so I think that's part of, it's just an inherited problem by nature of being a contract manufacturer. I think Kaitlyn listed a lot of the ultimate pain points, or what happens downstream from that. Dead inventory, I think, is a huge problem that we see if you're not smart about managing your part numbers.
Mhm.
I think, Scott, if I take one thing away from this, it's the idea that the job of the EMS is to inherit and absorb chaos. That is the perfect strap line for the entire industry. I really appreciate that. And it is true, regardless of what they want to do, there is this requirement put upon them by the customer. There's data coming to them from a supplier, and they are this kind of, as you say, the center of this storm of chaos, trying to figure out what to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think one good point to reiterate what Scott was saying is when you inherit something like that, you have to have a way to structure it internally so that you can manage what you're inheriting. And so, a lot of times I see that internal part numbers have been created because they're trying to manage the chaos that they're receiving, keep part numbers from one OEM together compared to other part numbers from a different OEM together. So they're trying to make sure that they can more easily manage the chaos. But in turn, that can also, as we all know, create pros and cons and create more chaos downstream. So there's a really big balance of how do you take what chaotic bombs that you get from your end customer and manage in an easier way without creating more internal chaos for you as a business.
Well, yeah. 20 years ago, there weren't systems, or even 30 years ago, when a lot of these companies were starting, there weren't really systems or structures in place that could smartly match an MPN across different programs, different contracts. And so you're thinking about, well, what's best for this customer is that I'm going to buy inventory for this job, for this PO, for this contract, and I'm going to ignore where that part number or that MPN might be used in other places, so that I can give a list of inventory to my large kind of gorilla customer of what I have in stock and what's short for them. And so, you're running on spreadsheets or some like old system. You can't accommodate that. The systems couldn't accommodate a more efficient way. So you build culture and patterns around customer specific part numbering. And so it's just, it was what made sense then. And it still does. And sometimes, you have to shift, or sometimes it's more effective to shift to a new way of doing it. Now that AI, and even a lot of this is just deterministic, isn't needed, necessarily. AI is now that you can, there are ways to handle one-to-many and still give that customer, here's your inventory that I purchased for you.
I think, Scott, the thing that shocked me when Eric talked to me about the webinar is why is this a problem? We're all members of numerous trade associations. Surely there are standards for this. Surely there's just a rule book that's given to every EMS company. This is how you do part numbers. All do it the same. Everything will be fine. That doesn't seem to be the case.
Yeah.
Why not?
I think that's to Scott's point, though. It's because years and years ago when this started, IPN was the rule because that's how software systems worked. I've worked with other ERP companies that they didn't have a great structure other than setting up an internal part number to manage the challenges that you're trying to solve with internal part numbers. So with the change of systems, over the last 20 years, that can be addressed now. There's real problems that internal part numbers do address, and we have to make sure that the way that your part numbering system is structured still addresses those issues, maybe without an internal part numbering system, but not all ERPs can handle it. So that is something to consider, because I think over the 300 plus EMS companies we use, I think there's probably over 50 different ERPs that we've seen. And that is some that have been using them for 30 years. And those may just not have the capabilities to do it.
Yeah.
Just to follow up on Phil's point there, though, so there is no industry standard. Is there any movement towards any such thing, or is it just the Wild West still? Yeah.
No.
I agree. Yeah. Short answer is
it
no.
is the Wild West.
And I think people have tried to push towards that, but I've not seen progress. Even, we generally recommend MPN focused, because we can give a one-to-many from across your part numbers within Cetec, a really elegant way to manage that and to still be able to allocate inventory to a job or a project. But processes and culture are already in place around IPNs, specifically customer-centric IPNs. And the other one that I've seen is machines. The MES is built around the IPN. Sure. And that's incredibly risky and difficult to try to transition out of. So your production now is run based on this part numbering scheme.
I agree with Scott. I mean, there's not really a structure or a industry standard. I would say there's recommendations over the customers that we've had across the 10 years I've been at CalcuQuote. They have used their ERP so differently than every single person. Even one customer who uses the same ERP system is likely using it different than the way a different customer is using that same ERP system. So there's, on the count of your hands, probably 5 different ways that you should set up your part numbering structure. But there's pros and cons to each of those. One of the things that internal part numbers definitely address is the way that you program your machines, to Scott's point. But there's a way to set up a manufacturing part number structure to still be able to address your programming of your machines. Cetec handles that really well, actually. And I know some other ERP systems do. So to me, it all goes back to how you set up and use your systems to make sure you can set them up for success in the future, because we need to be thinking future focused. We don't want to be having to manage things manually moving forward. And that's a lot of what internal part numbers tend to create, is manual management.
I'm thinking about the materials itself, and it's not like it just comes into an EMS and it stays there till it's assembled. Materials migrate, right? They get moved around, they get resold, right? So you have this whole activity within the industry. So within that type of a volatile environment, it sounds like you guys are advocating for the MPN over the IPN, because you just feel it as a more scalable, more flexible model?
Correct. Yeah. Partially, I mean, a lot of it is the way that inventory is managed and the way that you could share parts across. We were in such a crazy place, COVID times, which, is 6 years ago now. It doesn't feel like that far for a lot of customers. But there's so many, especially if you are a contract manufacturer, EMS, high mix, I guarantee, and I hate to say that word, but I mostly guarantee that your parts are going to be shared across your customers. Your caps and your resistors. I've talked to a couple EMS who say, oh, well, our customers never share parts. And I'm like, that's likely wrong. And I don't want to say that, but it's more because you should take advantage of the fact that customer A is using the same 0402 that customer B is using, because not only can you use the inventory that you already have on your shelf, but you could also get better buying power from your suppliers. Your suppliers will be happier with that. Your warehouse team is going to be happier with that. And your customer is going to be happier with that because you're at a lower price point. So those are so huge reasons why there's something to consider with MPNs and address the concerns of what IPNs address in a different way.
So, I just keep thinking about, there's smart people in this industry, obviously, who've been struggling with this, and right or wrong, they've decided on one methodology over the other for themselves, right? So there have to be some cons associated with the MPN, right? So there's some reasons that people are choosing not to adopt those. What are those, in your opinion? Then how do you mitigate those?
Yeah, one that I see come up frequently is MPNs they're long and lots of slashes, dashes, A's, B's. There's a lot of
packaging.
Them. A lot of them look very similar. And so if I've got an operator on the floor, it's difficult to identify what this is. So if you don't have a way to control what part you're picking or you're kitting, there's a lot of room for error just on the shop floor with what MPN am I looking at. So people like smart part numbering. It makes it more easily identifiable what EPN is.
And are they
I think on the flip
data
side
in
of that,
sorry, I was just curious, are they adding data in when they're creating their own part numbers? So when you go from a manufacturer's part number to an internal part number, is there data in there, like the customer it's going to be used on, stuff that actually adds value to that part number?
Yeah. And sometimes, but if you're buying across multiple jobs, the customer is associated based on the demand signal. and the PO coming in. And so when you receive that inventory, you can associate it to the customer when I place the PO or at receipt based on what's required, what the requirements are. And so the idea is that there are other ways to associate inventory to a customer so that you don't have to tie that to the customer part. So it becomes a little bit more scalable on that side.
Mm-hmm.
You were going to
I was going to add on the flip side of what Scott said, also part numbers are really short sometimes. So manufacturer part numbers, we run into the dreaded keystone part, the 5014 that is also used as a different manufacturer part number for a different manufacturer. So there's definitely still challenges with it. I believe that the challenges are not as big as the rewards, but the short MPNs and the long MPNs plus the machine programming are typically the two things that, especially from an EMS perspective, we hear at CalcuQuote when we're talking to customers or they're transitioning their ERP systems, because those are things that you have to rethink when you're looking at a different MPN structure or a different part structure.
So, Kaitlyn, if you ruled the world, what would be the part number structure that you would select? What's the ideal that we should all be striving to get towards? Or
I'm a
is
big
there more
fan.
than one answer?
I mean, I think there is maybe more than one answer. I would say for the most part, I don't want to give a specific number, but overall, for the most part, MPN structure is the way to go. It's what we recommend at CalcuQuote when we're helping implement ERP systems for our customers from a consulting perspective, because of the inventory problem. I think it's huge. I mean, I had a customer that we implemented that they had overstated their inventory. Well, I guess they had so much extra inventory. They had over $2 million of inventory that they could have shared across other customers. So that alone reduced their inventory almost 25% by just doing that. So there's a huge advantage to that. So if I had, my magic wand, I would say MPN structure is the way to go for most of the contract manufacturers in the EMS space. It just makes a lot more sense, with the caveat of you have to have a system that allows you to do it the right way. Because if you have a system that you say, I'm just going to use an MPN structure without considering, well, what do I use to program my machines? Because MPNs are usually too long to program a machine. Usually most MES or machines don't allow you to do over a certain number of characters. So you have to make sure that you have a right system that can allocate or manage that, because if you don't, then you're also setting yourself up for failure, and people are going to say, why do an MPN if I'm just going to cause so much downstream problems?
Yeah. Or on that, how do you handle alternates? It's a question that we get.
Yeah.
So how would that be? So if somebody has an IPN and they've decided Kaitlyn's right, that's brilliant advice, we're going to go to MPN. That's not an easy, smooth process now. So talk us through that. What would that actually look like, a transition like that?
Scott, you want to take that one first?
Right? Or? I mean, because
Can't you just press a button in Scott's system and it's the Kaitlyn button and everything changes to Kaitlyn's way of doing things?
I'll say that's what a lot of CEOs think sometimes.
Yeah.
I was going to ask that next, actually. So, but no, talk us through kind of the pain points, and because if there is going to be a transition, or is the industry kind of just migrating in that direction as a whole, you see, and it's just going to take more time?
I think about this transition. We've helped a couple customers do this on Cetec, right? So they've been operating on Cetec and then to have the realization, 7-8 years in, we have a lot of dead inventory. We need to transition, and it's similar to an ERP switch. It's a little painful. So you have to be able to identify inventory by MPN. That may be the toughest piece of this. Everything else is
data.
Is data. We can script it. There are rules around it, but if we don't have access to, I've got this customer part number and I don't know what MPN that bin or that receipt actually is, I don't have a way to, I can't move that to a different part number. I can't associate that somewhere else. But otherwise, it's all data scripting, and not it's a lot of time and a lot of details, and there's some risk, but it's not actually that bad.
I think to that, like, the key is prep your team. I think that Scott's right. The warehouse, huge usually that's a huge hurdle, mostly because if you're using an internal part number structure, you are already stocking your warehouse based on internal part number. So you likely have 4 of the same capacitor in 4 different locations because they're tied to different internal part numbers. So now you have to reorg your entire warehouse. You have to then physically move all your inventory. You have to rebarcode your warehouses, which is without a doubt a huge undertaking. I think the bigger thing typically is change management. The people on your production floor who are used to programming your SMT machines, who are used to kitting your jobs, who are used to, looking at labels a certain way, you now have to retrain every single one of those people. So whether you're a $10 million EMS or whether you're a $300 million EMS, you now have to potentially train 20 to hundreds of different people who are on your floor, second shifts, and get them to understand what that new structure is. And that is usually difficult. However, the benefit of that, in my opinion, is let's say people are transitioning from one company to another. Now you can create some consistency. So if multiple companies are using an MPN structure, an MPN is pretty common in this industry. It is what Digi-Key uses. It's what Mouser uses. It's what Avnet uses. It's what all the manufacturers use. So now if I work at one company and I'm used to an MPN structure, I don't have to go to the next company and use an IPN structure. I can just have some consistency. And I think that's good for teaching people in this industry and getting people to understand.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned before, that's what CEO think. That's what CEOs think. It's just, hit a switch and it's going to go over. So it strikes me in just hearing you guys talk that this was an issue that was just being managed, for years and decades down at this level, as material and supply chain management has really become the expertise of the EMS companies. This has risen to the attention of the C-suite now. And like you said, with what happened during COVID, certainly brought inventory into sharp focus for everybody, right? So is this, in your experience with the EMS, Kaitlyn, that you referenced 300 EMS that you guys deal with, is the visibility and the impact and the concern being expressed at that level?
Definitely. I mean, I mostly see it because of what's on their P&L. So I'm mostly, CEOs, as they should be, very worried about their profit and loss. And when you have your inventory increasing aggressively, your turns aren't as quick as you'd like them to be, that's going to be at the forefront of their mind. And I mean, Scott knows this more than I do. An ERP switch is no small feat. That is a huge implementation. It is a big financial thing as well to look at. But because of those types of numbers on your P&L, especially from an inventory perspective, it's usually one that creates a huge ROI at the end of it as well, as long as you're picking the right ERP system. So,
yeah, and the right numbering system.
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
Scott, when you were talking about the large amount of data early on, you mentioned in a time of AI. Are you using AI to support this process? Should we be?
I think CalcuQuote is doing some things on the supply chain side. A lot of it we've been able to handle deterministically. So as long as I can go look at your database and I can pull out all of the MPNs. That's old, easy. Yeah. So a lot of it on our side is just reading the data and making sure that it we can scrub it and we have a good comparison of before. You want your balance sheet to be the same before and after the transition, right? Then AI can help with scrubbing data, large data sets in the transition, and then there's a lot that you can do. I think there's more I think you can do operationally after the switch with AI to execute.
Yeah, Kaitlyn, anything to add on the AI question, which is a part of every conversation these days?
every single conversation. Yeah, I mean, AI is huge for creating some consistent data, right? Especially when we talk about customers to creating consistent part numbers and creating consistent part types, right? There's so many different types of part that one person may call an SMT, another person may call it something else. So using AI to create some consistency with the industry has been something that we have been working on very heavily and we find incredibly important. And that's what a lot of customers are asking for. They do want some consistency across the board. I think to the earlier question about what is the industry doing as it relates to, an industry standard, I think AI will help with that a lot. Are we this year? Probably not. Maybe moving into next year, getting a lot closer. I think that's going to be a huge benefit to the industry, is using AI to create some industry consistencies across how they're doing these types of things, how they're calling parts, how they're identifying differentiations in part numbers. So we use it as much as we can with customers. But I will say, we also aren't using it unintentionally. I think there's a lot of buzz around AI, which is great, and it is such a valuable resource. But it can also just be that which is a buzz. So it shouldn't be used in a way that doesn't really benefit, the end user.
Yeah, I think intentionality is the key to success with any AI implementation.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
As I'm hearing you speak, I'm thinking about the industry, the EMS industry in particular, right? And just how complex it is, and also the global region. So I'm wondering is there any differences between the regions? Largely speaking, Americas, Europe, Asia, right? I mean, if we take those three troughs, are there differences that you sense in there, or maybe across the different sectors, the more regulated versus the more commoditized, for lack of a better term? I mean, in the way that they adopt this, or is that just, how do you see that?
Yeah,
that's a great question. I think from my perspective, it has more to do with the culture of an individual company and the capabilities that they have on their team, especially smaller manufacturers. They don't have a full-blown IT department that is thinking through how we're going to implement these things. It's their managers, their key stakeholders that don't have a bunch of extra time, all right, to get things over the hurdle on this. And so even within EMS or any industry, really, it can vary based on it's a similar conversation around, are they, when they're transitioning to Cetec, are they keeping their CPNs because culturally they can't shift, and even their management team can't conceive of a different way of doing things? That's what AI is, a total paradigm shift on how your day-to-day can function. Like, it requires vision and the technical aptitude to be able to implement that. And so like even within EMS, I think that EMS is probably more likely to be, so there's so much innovation on the shop floor with the machines, but I think it's likely to be ahead of the curve in manufacturing. I do also think that SMB will be well behind, right? They'll look and wait for agents to become more like a AI as a service. I was trying to think how you would say that, and it doesn't sound
as eloquent as you thought.
Yeah. So I do think, like, to Kaitlyn's point, like, software companies will have to provide more AI as a service for smaller manufacturers to be able to adopt that, because the hurdle to get there is so much larger. Whereas larger companies can have teams and people that this is their full-time job. So yeah.
Okay. Kaitlyn, anything to add?
I think it's interesting over the last few years, and I recently took over global commercial. So I've seen a lot of different influence from the European customers versus the North America customers versus the Asia customers. I think, sometimes you have really small EMS companies who are in their early 30s. They took over the EMS company from the previous founder, and they're just ready to get started and go and figure it out. And those people are going to go every way that they can make their lives easier. AI, MPN based, just let's run this company as simple as we can and grow it as fast as we can. And then, I see a lot of that happening in the US. I start to see that more happening in Europe as well, which is really exciting. I will say in Europe, it tends to seem that they're a bit slower to adopt because they have so many requirements from their end customers with different country requirements as well. I don't know if that's something you guys see too, but I've talked to a lot of different customers in the EU, and because they have different customers in different regions, locations and different countries, different requirements, which also means the same industry has different requirements. It just creates even more complexity compared to what we're looking at in the US. Now, in the US, we have requirements with ITAR and, aerospace and defense and things like that, but that's specific to the US usually, where in Europe, they're not. Europe is not one large country, right? It's so many different countries that have different requirements, and that creates complexity, which sometimes makes it harder for an EMS who inherits all the chaos to adapt and to adapt quicker to technology. But that also means that they might need to because they have to. Mm-hmm. So kind of an interesting dynamic.
Yeah. I saw Phil smiling there when you mentioned the reducing chaos. I think he's liking that theme that's coming out of...
yeah, I like it too. I like it too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm liking that theme, but also I was enjoying Kaitlyn's point about, the difference between operating in the US and Europe, where you have, as Scott said, some of these things are cultural. There are a lot of different cultural imperatives here, lots of different priorities. And the EMS companies here tend to have a lot of different OEM history in their background. You look at the Scandinavians and their connection to Ericsson and Nokia generally. And then you look at the, the French companies, how connected they are to the French automotive sector and the players in those markets. And that's all driven different ways of doing things and different priorities. And that will have created some necessary and unnecessary complexity, or chaos, as we like to call it on today's show.
Yeah.
Just to kind of to bring this to a head here, then, if you were, as you do undoubtedly, you guys work with EMS companies or companies going through transitions, struggling with this. What's your best advice to these companies as you're doing? You some of it's sprinkled through this, but I wanted to ask you to kind of maybe summarize kind of what's your best advice that you talk to companies as you're engaging around this issue with them?
I think of two big things. Number one, I kind of already mentioned it, but prep your team. Don't rip the Band-Aid off. That is just going to create a spin of a culture, probably a negative one. So that's a really big one. Bring your team along for the ride. But number two, this is not a small transition, and you want to make sure you're getting the value and you understand the value. I've had a lot of customers who've said, yep, let's move to an MPN structure. And it was painful. And during that pain, they forgot what the end goal was and what realizing that. So I always recommend people run some numbers, like look at what it would look like from a numbers perspective if you move to an MPN structure. Make sure you're hitting all of those things that your IPNs solve today and that you have a way to solve them for the future. And that could be your goalpost for the end of this. And if you don't have a good goalpost to go towards, you forget why you're doing this through the hard times. And, when we do projects, when we do ERP implementations, we always tell our customers, name your project. And so I've had a lot of customers who have called their project something silly, bonfire, torch, things like that, because, they're blowing it all up and changing it. But that's really important because that has a meaning behind it, which usually has numbers behind it for the CEO. It has numbers behind it for the CFO. It has drive for the whole team. And I would recommend every company should do that, as silly as it sounds.
Yeah, I like it.
Scott?
I echo especially number two is like you need to understand, you need to know that the cost is worth the pain of transitioning. And so all of this flushes out to the P&L. I think one of the things that we deeply care about at Cetec is people knowing their profitability and their job profitability. And so if you feel like you're bleeding cash, I would challenge that probably it has a lot to do with the CPN-centric part numbering scheme, right? You have dead inventory. Do you know your turns, your inventory turns? So my first piece of advice is like, do you have the data that you need to understand the details of your company at a high level? That becomes the benchmark of success, or that we need to change. From there, you from top, and then similar to an ERP transition is when there's not C-level involvement or top-down management of this, it fails. The team needs to be bought in and understand that CEO, COO, your controller, they're bought in and driving this change, and we're all kind of caught into this vision of here's the end outcome. And then there will be operational thing. There's training the people, understanding the change management of the details and the execution of the project. Like, you'll want somebody dedicated to managing the steps of the project, working with a consultant or your ERP provider, and ensuring that you can execute the project. I do actually think about it in a lot of ways like an ERP transition, because your ERP will be totally different after you make that switch, right? So your warehouse will look different. And so you need a team dedicated to managing that project, and somebody on the side that can help you with the data and kind of guiding you through the steps.
Yeah. Kaitlyn, as you look at that, if you are talking to a customer or an EMS that maybe isn't a customer that's looking at doing this, I think a lot of them would need a framework and would need some hand-holding, some guidance in how do I define the value of this project, and how do I then build a framework with a path to success. Is that something you do on a regular basis?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we call it business blueprinting. It's incredibly important. And actually, the customer I was with last week, reiterated to say the person who you're implementing with is kind of make or break for your project, because they will help drive you and direct you in a way that can make sure you could be successful. And maybe not just the person, but the company in general. So I think it's really important for customers to consider, especially when they're doing an ERP switch, or an MPN switch, if they're using the same ERP system, and part numbering switch, whatever they're actually doing, even outside of maybe part numbering, that they make sure they have the right company and the right people to direct them, because they have day jobs. Like, they're not just sitting there waiting for an implementation to happen. Most of the time, most companies don't have one person who owns implementation only, and that's their only job. They have much other things to be doing. So creating a business blueprint for us when we're doing consulting projects and ERP implementations for customers is really critical, because not only can we identify where the gaps are, but we can help drive them to say, here's the things that you guys need to make sure you focus on to be successful.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Guys, this has been excellent. Before I let you all go there, is there anything that you wanted to say when we started this 40 minutes ago and you didn't get a chance to yet? Here is your opportunity. Anything about this topic that we didn't get to cover?
I think the biggest thing for me is just open your mind up. Be open to the idea of it. Most customers, as soon as you say it, who are on an IPN, are going to be like, absolutely not going to happen, not even considering it. Just look at the numbers. Just see what the numbers say. Numbers speak for themselves. Just consider it. Doesn't mean you have to pull the trigger and do it. Just look at what it might do for your business. And I think that's, in this industry, sometimes we get so siloed into doing what we do every single day, and we just stick to it because it's been working and we're growing our business and great. But what if we could do it better? So that's my last tidbit: is open your mind. Open your mind.
Scott?
Mine is listen to Kaitlyn, do whatever she says.
Okay, listen,
I like that
Kaitlyn. Mine is embrace the chaos.
Yeah.
It's what our industry is all about. You've got to embrace that chaos.
Yeah.
Because it will always be there in one form or another.
No, precisely right. That's the nature of the biz, isn't it? So listen, Kaitlyn Stott, thank you very much. For those watching and seeing this, she is Kaitlyn Tredaway with CalcuQuote. He is Scott Ryan with Cetec ERP. Please reach out to them with any questions, any follow-up. They're easy to find on LinkedIn. That's where I found them. So very good. Guys, thank you very much for this. This was excellent. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you guys as well.
Bye for now, guys. Bye.
Bye.